Okay, we're going to move to revising language paper 2. We're going to start with this image of squeezing a lemon again because, lo and behold, language analysis is central to this paper as well. It's central to the entire course in literature, particularly in poetry, but also in drama, in novel study, in everything in English. The understanding of the language and learning to analyze language is central. So the more you work on this, the better for you. And the key concepts really with language analysis is getting relevant evidence. How do you know it's relevant? It backs up the question. You get rich evidence, which is juicy, to use this metaphor, something that has meaning, has potential, and that you can squeeze it of its meaning. That's the analysis of language, and that you can, beyond that, comment on effects, not just identify devices. So let's look at, we're going to begin by looking at the timings for paper 2, which is a little bit different. It's a lot more complicated, this paper. I'm going to pose that to you, and then I'm going to show you an alternative way of doing the paper. So first off, like with paper 1, you have a very banal first question that should only take you a few minutes. Then you get this very tricky and annoying comparison question. Well, it's not actually comparison, it's summarize the difference. And you should know that according to AQA, this is the worst performing question in over the 2 papers. It is a very tricky question for very little outcome, 8 marks. Then we have our favorite, which is language analysis, which is what we're going to look at today. And it's 12 marks. And then you get this very complex question 4, which is the comparison of attitudes and methods. And what I like to note to students is, if you remember the difference between this and paper 1, this is out of 20, and paper 1, this is out of 8. And what it seems like is they've pulled 4 marks from question 4 to question 3, as a way almost of acknowledging how difficult this paper is, particularly question 4. That's just real nerdery. But again, I just want you to think about that, because it's worth thinking about how difficult this paper is, and how difficult question 4 is in particular, and how question 3 is a bit of a give. Now, with paper 1, question 5, which is of course the most important question, the creative writing question, comes out of, organically, the creative writing piece. It is something related thematically. You can use the language, the imagery. I've had students who use the structure of the piece and use that to enhance their creative writing. In this paper, you get 2 sources, one from the 1900s, one's contemporary, on a related theme, and then you're asked to write about something that isn't necessarily directly relevant from the sources. And it really begs the question, why write the paper in this direction? Now, some people, and AQA would argue certainly, that doing the reading section can help you with the writing section. I definitely agree with that for language paper 1. I don't agree with that in language paper 2. My next objection really to this paper is this question 2 and question 4 problem. You need to read both sources for both of these questions, but one is worth double the other. I really think the smarter way to do this paper is to do question 4 before you do question 2, particularly because question 2 is so poor in its performance. So let me posit to you an alternative way of doing the paper. If we did it the original way, you'd go, again, I'm presuming you don't read for the 15 minutes given to you, but that you read more strategically throughout the exam. you could go 4 minutes for question 1, 17 minutes for question 2, 17 minutes for question 3, 22 minutes for question 4, and then the normal 5:35:5 for question 5. There's a lot of issues here. To spend the exact same time on questions that have very significant different weighting seems problematic. Also, expending 17 minutes on that very difficult question is really, really very annoying for me. And then finally, question 5, as opposed to language paper 1, where question 5 can come out organically, can give you vocabulary, imagery, ideas. Here, I don't see any purpose in doing that. So my alternative timing for this exam, this underperforming exam, this is a really difficult strategic choice that you're going to really need to think through if you go this way, is to begin with question 5. Really, really difficult and hardcore to go this way, but it can make you safe if you stay to time. Following from that, we are doing the normal things, except we jump over question 2 because it is not worth as many marks and it is so difficult. And we do question 2 after we've done question 4. Almost, even though both questions are different, you've been spending so much time comparing in question 4 and thinking about both sources and preparing both sources. The hope is that question 2 could come out organically out of question 4. So the alternative timing, begin with question 5, 5 minutes to plan, 35 to write, 5 to edit, normal. Question 1, 4 minutes, no worries. Question 3 then, language analysis, which is what we're working on today. Question 4, which is very complex and requires a lot of your thinking, and then end with question 2. So whatever way you want to do it, you're going to need to think strategically about how you're going to do this exam. I will say, I think of question 2 as the trap, and it's a trap for a number of reasons. AQA would argue, and I've debated examiners about this. AQA, the designers of this exam, would argue that question 2 then helps set you up for question 4. I don't agree. It doesn't seem to do that, and it seems really disruptive to go from one source to 2 sources to 1 source again. Whereas the way I'm proposing doing it would be 1 source, the big comparison, and then the final summary. I think this is a more coherent approach to this exam. I invite you to think about it. This only works if you know exactly what you're doing, and I hope you're starting to realize that both papers, it's all about timing. Okay, so what are we doing for language analysis for question 3? Well, it's the same thing, except you are not given the range cut out for you like you are in paper 1. You have to go to the source and draw out the range. This may seem a bit technical, but remember your insert is separate from your question paper. I immediately rip the 2 sources apart so I can start to write, and when I'm comparing, I like to have them both in front of me. So right away we find the range, which is lines 18 to 28. Be careful. You got to know what source you're writing on as well. And that's here. It's source A. Just get focused. How does the writer use language to describe his son? Okay. That's what we are being asked to look at. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of static with my focus. I apologize. So let's read this and see if we can. Now, it's the last, in paper 1, it was only worth 8 marks. Here it's 12 marks, so we really want 4 quotations. So let's see if I can, what I would be looking for, and I really encourage you to annotate closely your text. We're looking for language to describe the son. A year ago, he was a sleepy ball of scrunched up flesh, but is now determinedly his own person. I can see everyone in him, me, my wife, my parents, yet he's already separate from all of us. He's giddy and silly. He's a show-off, albeit one who's irrationally terrified of my dad. He loves running up to people, waiting for them to twang his lips like a ruler on a table. When he gets tired and barks gibberish in the middle of the room, he throws his entire body into it like he's trying to shove the noise up a hill. With every tiny development, every new step he takes, every new tooth and sound and reaction that comes along to ambush us, we're confronted with a slightly different child. Ambush. Photos of him taken in the summer seem like dispatches from a million years ago. Photos of him taken last week seem like a different boy. He's blasting ahead as far as he can. He's growing up fast. And he's leaving milestone after milestone in his wake, and tiny parts of me along with him. Okay, so we have 5 quotations. That's already the biggest part of this question. You've extracted evidence. Now it's a matter of how are we going to analyze this. Let's start with this first quote. Sleepy ball of scrunched up flesh, now determinedly his own person. We get an image of a scrunched up little guy. We get a metaphor of him being a ball, a contrast between the small version and becoming independent. We can start to think about these words. Scrunched implies bunched up, collapsed, and an object is what that sleepy ball of flesh, I think, gives me the image of something helpless, small, passive, dependent. What helps me make that analysis is the contrast between his own person. So from flesh, now he's become human. Okay, so he's changed, he's changing, he's becoming bigger. It's like he was crumpled up in the corner. Oh, crumpled is better, I like. See, why we squeeze the lemon 2 or 3 times, it's as we get further along, we get better words, better ideas. Let me do another one with you. Let's try giddy, show off, one who's irrationally terrified. Giddy and silly, playful, joyful, naughty, irrationally terrified. Scared. I just have to start there. Scared, of course. Repulsed. For some reason, terrified. Can't be with. So again, I think we get a contrast in his naughtiness and his fear. Barks gibberish in the middle of the room, throws his entire body into it. I mean, I'm not a big fan of that, but if I did, I'd gibberish. Barks. Barks then is a metaphor, like a dog. He's like a dog. The image of him throwing himself into it is committing, throws his entire body into it. Full play, no fear, middle of the room. He's a dog, center of attention. You see, once you get the key quotations and you start doing this kind of annotation, anatomizing of the actual language here, you can start to see what it is that language analysis is that it's a very close attention to the words and the devices and what they do to us. They make me think he's very wild, he's growing very quickly, he's really fun, he's frustrating though, He doesn't seem passive at all. We can see that the father is so thrilled by him and so excited by him. All those are things that come from paying very close attention to the language. What students don't do is they don't annotate the passage. They don't pull out enough evidence that's relevant, that answers the question. They don't pull out enough evidence that's rich, that actually helps them facilitate their analysis. And will identify things like nouns and verbs and similes and metaphors and not necessarily talk about what the effects on the reader are. So if you can do those things, and we've talked about them, you will do very well. Like I said, you don't need the topic, sentence, or point necessarily, but you will have 1 to 5 quotations. You will be able to squeeze the lemon and remember those 5 questions of analysis. What's being described? What does it symbolize? What are the keywords? We've always zoomed into the keywords and squeezed. What are personal responses, devices, and effects? So you could talk about devices plus personal response. The effect on me as a reader makes me feel, it makes me think, it makes me want to understand. You don't want to say things like it just makes me want to read on, as I'll review in a second. You must spend some time after you analyze to explain, which is a separate thing. What does it mean to explain? How does my analysis answer the question? So if you are having difficulty coming up with a topic, sentence, or point, don't worry, you can do it here, or you could do it at the end of the paragraph. But if you did this 4 or 5 times with real speed and rigor and used a lot of evidence from the extract, you would do very well in beginning to really understand what language analysis is. And it's the exact same thing it is in the previous paper, and it's different, but it's absolutely related in the entire literature spec, which is about getting rich, relevant phrases, zooming into keywords and squeezing the lemon, explaining and analyzing the effects, and we've talked about using that. You can use personal response, and of course explaining by linking the analysis to what's actually going on. What you definitely shouldn't be doing is just labeling features without commenting on the effects, just inferring, or just saying, oh, this makes me want to read on, or puts a picture in my head. Be more specific. Why does it make you want to read on? What does it make you think is going to happen? What picture are you getting in the head? Describe that picture. But better for you to make these observations driven by evidence, as much evidence as you can, and as much zooming into the language as you can. And of course, this metaphor of squeezing the lemon will help you a great deal. So now we see that we have 8 marks in language paper 1, 12 marks in language paper 2, and the entire literature spec. It is worth your time figuring out what is your style for language analysis, what are you going to do, what your process is, and how much time you will spend.